Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Dave's Faves. And today we have another opera, in this case, Rossini's Tancredi. This was the opera that established his reputation. It was the greatest hit of 1813, largely as a result of its incredibly famous opera Di Tanti Palpiti, which actually was the subject of one of the world's most beautiful melodies. So you can go hear it there if you'd like. But the whole opera is well worth listening to. This is the Naxos recording with Eva Podles in one of her greatest roles, and Sumi Joe, and Stanford Olson, and Pietro Spagnoli, and Anna Maria DeMarco, and Lucrezia Lendi, conducted by Alberto Zedda. Yeah, all those people. It's an amazing performance, actually. The other one that you sort of have to have if you're a Tancredi fan is Marilyn Horns on Sony, if you can still find it. That has the alternative ending, because there are two endings to Tancredi. One is the traditional happy ending, where Tancredi defeats, the Saracens and also his rival for the love of what's her name here, Amenaide, and then everybody celebrates and they're all happy. And then the one where he's mortally wounded and he dies. They get married and he dies. Just as soon as they're married, he dies in her arms. The tragic ending, which is actually the way the play was supposed to end. But, opera seria traditions being what they were back in the day, you had to have a happy ending. And so there are two. And the unhappy ending was not very popular because people wanted their happy ending. And so Rossini ditched it, and it wasn't discovered until around 1976, after which it was restored and sometimes is preferred. But this is the traditional happy ending version, and happy it is, the original actually Venice version of the opera, because as with all these popular operas back in the days, they were tailored and revised depending on where they were going to be performed. But this is a wonderful, wonderful performance of a great, great piece. The story, in case you're wondering, it's just for fun. It takes place in Syracuse, in Sicily, Syracusa. And there's a civil war going on between Almenaide's dad, whose name is Argirio, and his rival, Orbazzano. And the civil war is settled by having Argirio tell, what's his nice guy's name, Orbazzano, that he can marry Amenaide, his daughter. Well, Amenaide is secretly betrothed to Tancredi, who had been exiled to Byzantium owing to political intrigue in Syracuse. So people think that he's a traitor, but he's really not. He's really loyal to Syracuse, even though he shows up in disguise. And he wants to marry Amenaide. And she sends him a letter saying, hey, I'm going to get married to this guy. You got to help me. Come on, get over here quick. We need to do something here. And so he shows up, but he doesn't know that she's written to him because the letter has secretly been intercepted by Amenaide, and it's so complicated. It all kind of works out in the end, at least in time for Tancredi to either get married or die, depending on which version you're dealing with. And to make things even more complicated, the Saracen leader also wants to marry Almenaide because she had been somehow furtively zipping around Byzantium where she met Tancredi, but also managed to attract the attention of the Saracen leader, whose name is something like Solomide or something. I don't know. He sounds like a roofing contractor for a solar panel installation company. I mean, that's what he is. But the roofing contractor gets defeated and doesn't get to marry Almenaide, or Amenaide. Oh, goodness gracious, who cares? The music is absolutely glorious. Glorious. And it's also worth pointing out that Naxos has been steadily making progress in doing all of the Rossini operas in their critical editions, or close to them, as many as possible, because the critical edition is ongoing. And now that Philip Gossett has passed away, I assume it's going to continue without him, but that's going to be a chore, because he was a force of nature and the god of Italian opera in the early 19th century. But anyway, what can we do? We have this edition. It's inexpensive. It comes with a libretto, not translated, but a very detailed plot synopsis in case you care about the plot. One other thing I want to point out, this piece revolutionized Italian opera. It set the standard for which, everybody else was aspiring, including Donizetti and Bellini and early Verdi and all those people. It was Rossini who invented the entrance aria, cavatina, cabaletta, sort of combination thing where a character comes in and he sings his thingy where he sort of says who he is and what he's doing or what's going on or how he feels. Then there's an interruption of some kind that gives introduces a new element, and then there's a cabaletta that releases the pent-up tension in a grand exordium of vocal fireworks, sometimes if it's a quick one, explaining what the guy's going to do next. But this was important. It was important because instead of having the old standard opera seria or Baroque opera seria aria, which tried to follow the single affect rule. That is, it expressed one feeling, and the character would come in and sing about their feeling and leave the stage. These arias, as Rossini designed it, actually propel the action along. Stuff happens in them, and the characters, especially in duets, react to each other. And Rossini also introduced for the first time in opera seria, not really, but majorly, a chorus of characters. It's a character in its own right. He did all kinds of nifty things in this, even though it still has the traditional secco or dry recitative accompanied by a forte piano or a harpsichord or something. And then, the arias in the middle. But the recitatives are short and they really keep the thing going, and stuff happens in the arias. That's what you need to remember about Rossini. Stuff happens in the arias. That would become the model for all of 19th century Italian opera. And although Verdi, for example, rebelled against the aria cabaletta formula, because it became a formula. It wasn't one when Rossini invented it, but it became one. The concept remained the same, that things have to happen while they're singing, not just in between the parts where they're singing. And that was a revolution, and Tancredi is the work that began the revolution. And if you care about opera at all, or you're interested in music theater, this is a critical work. And remember, it was back in 1813. What most people don't remember or don't acknowledge about Rossini is that he was a classical composer, because he stopped writing operas in 1829. It was about the same time that Beethoven and Schubert were dead. He was the Italian equivalent of the classical period in opera. And although some people say he was like neoclassical or late classical, who cares? Classical is as classical sounds. If it looks like a classic, it sounds like a classic, it's a classic, right? So that's what Rossini was up to. And so form and stylistic elegance and the giant arc of the whole thing actually is critically important. And it's all the more amazing that Rossini was able to do it, given the circumstances of Italian opera of the day, when it was still, the theater was enslaved to star singers, and people had to adapt their operas to whatever the circumstances were locally, and there was no such thing as a definitive text for anything. But Rossini still managed to do it. One way he did it was by marrying the prima donna, Isabella Colbrand. So he wrote for her, and she had to write what he sang. That helped. But it really is an amazing thing. It was a revolution in its way, and this is the opera where you get to hear it in its purest and most pellucidly nascent form. It's just glorious. So keep on listening, friends, to Rossini's Tancredi. You're going to love it. You really will. It's just beautiful stuff. Absolutely wonderful. Thanks for joining me. Take care.